The town of Ash Grove had a way of burying its past, quietly, discreetly, like a bad memory. Yet one structure always stood stubbornly against that forgetting: the old Black Hollow Hospital. Tucked behind the ridge of dead pine trees, its silhouette loomed even in daylight, as if time itself had refused to pass through its broken windows. Mara had heard of it all her life. Whispers in the schoolyard, dares scrawled in notebooks, the usual urban legend chatter, patients who screamed through the night, doctors who vanished, a wing that was sealed shut and never reopened. She never believed any of it. Not really, until tonight. Midnight had just tipped into the air, cold and still, as she and Ethan climbed through the twisted fence that circled the forgotten hospital. Their breath came in foggy puffs, caught briefly in the beam of Ethan's camera light. They were here for a reason: to film. Not for clout, not for some viral ghost hunting stunt, but for answers. Ethan's brother Ben disappeared 3 years ago. His last known location? Here. One blurry photo remained. A shot of the hospital's rear entrance, time-stamped at 12:07 a.m. Mara and Ethan moved slowly, carefully. The air felt heavy, as though the building exhaled each time they stepped forward. The door creaked open, not from their touch, but as if it had been waiting. Inside, time seemed to hesitate. The walls, once white, now wore layers of peeling skin. Gurneys with rusted wheels lined the corridor, each one pointed inward, like spectators to some invisible ritual. "Get the shot of the hall," Mara whispered. Ethan raised the camera, and the light flickered, just for a moment, long enough to catch the image of a figure at the end of the corridor, standing still, facing them and gone. Ethan had always been drawn to things others avoided: dark tunnels, creepy folklore, abandoned buildings. He liked the way the unknown made his pulse quicken. His fascination had started young, when he'd found his grandfather's collection of old paranormal books in the attic. He devoured them: ghosts, cryptids, curses. He loved it all. By the time he turned 26, exploring abandoned places had become more than a hobby. It was a calling. Mara, on the other hand, hadn't always been into the supernatural. But she loved Ethan, and his energy was hard to resist. They met in college, both majoring in film. She was the more grounded of the two, detail-oriented, thoughtful. She worried about things like trespassing laws, unstable floors, and the possibility of running into squatters. But she also knew how to shoot a beautiful scene and had a sixth sense for atmosphere. They had started their channel, Echo Explorers, during the pandemic, more as a creative outlet than anything else. But people liked them, liked their honesty, the unfiltered tension of their night expeditions, and the way they never overdramatized the experience. They didn't fake jump scares or scream into the camera. Instead, they whispered. They waited. They listened. They let the fear come naturally. Now, standing in front of the rusting gates of St. Aurelian's, that natural fear was here in full. Mara adjusted her scarf and looked up at the building. Even under a pale moon, it seemed impossibly dark inside. "You know," she said quietly, "I read that this place was built on an old battlefield. Civil War, maybe earlier. Some say the ground's cursed." "Perfect," Ethan said, half joking. "Cursed ground makes for great content." She didn't respond. Her flashlight flickered once, then steadied. They passed through the main gate, the lock already broken. Someone had been here recently. Fresh footprints led through the snow to the lobby doors, but they disappeared just as suddenly. No exit prints. Inside, the hospital still carried the heavy scent of time. Damp plaster, mildew, scorched wood. Echoes of a place that had once thrived, now falling apart piece by piece. The reception area looked like a war zone, glass everywhere, overturned desks, half-melted medical files in warped cabinets. Mara filmed slowly, panning across the crumbling walls. "We're in the lobby of St. Aurelian's Hospital," she whispered for the mic. "Closed in 1983 after a string of patient deaths and unexplained activity. People say the nurses here saw shadows where there shouldn't have been any, heard voices from locked rooms. And that on the last night," Ethan added. "The head doctor, Harold Voss, went missing during the fire. They never found his body." They stepped deeper into the darkness. Each hallway seemed to stretch impossibly far, swallowed at the edges by black. Ethan's camera light bounced off dust-covered wheelchairs, broken gurneys, rusted IV poles. A child's doll lay near the elevator shaft, one eye missing, hair soaked in something dark and crusted. "I don't like this," Mara whispered. "You never like hospitals," Ethan replied gently. "No, I mean this one," she said. "It feels like it doesn't want us here." They reached the main corridor, where a sign overhead still listed departments: radiology, maternity, psychiatric ward, records. The psychiatric ward was marked with peeling red tape, restricted access. "Do not enter," Ethan raised a brow. "Guess where we're going?" Mara sighed but nodded. She knew it was coming. Every time Ethan found a place with locked doors or warning signs, he had to go in. He needed the thrill. And if she was honest, so did their viewers. They passed. The remnants of the nurses' station. A few charts were still scattered there, names faded, vitals scrawled in shaky ink. One caught Mara's eye. It was dated March 18, 1983, just one day before the hospital officially shut down. The patient's name was redacted, but their status line read, "Subject continues to respond to Dr. Voss's nightly treatments. Hallucinations increasing. Claims to hear the voice beneath the floors." Mara swallowed hard. "Ethan, look at this." He scanned the paper and gave a low whistle. "Creepy," he said, clearly intrigued. They filmed a few quiet segments in silence. The camera hummed as it recorded, catching the eerie stillness that pressed down on them like thick fog. Then faintly, from somewhere deep in the building, a soft metallic clang echoed. Both of them froze. Ethan turned toward the sound, instinctively, angling the camera. "Hello?" he called out. Mara grabbed his arm. "Don't. Could be an animal," he whispered. "Or pipes, old building sounds." But Mara's eyes had gone wide. "Did you see that?" "See what?" She pointed, toward the hallway. "I swear. Someone walked by. Down there." Ethan swung the light around, but it revealed only peeling walls and broken glass. "Let's keep filming," he said quietly. She nodded, but her grip tightened on the flashlight. Whatever they were about to uncover inside this hospital, it felt awake, and it had been waiting for them. The deeper they ventured into the hospital, the more the air changed. It wasn't just cold anymore. It was dense, almost sticky, like walking into a space that hadn't been disturbed in decades. Every breath tasted of mildew and burnt chemicals. Their footsteps, once sharp against the tiled floors, were now muffled as if the building were swallowing the sound. They followed the corridor marked psychiatric ward until it sloped downward, slightly, into an area where the ceiling sagged and the emergency lights, long dead, hung askew from broken wiring. The farther they walked, the more Mara began to notice that their flashlights were behaving oddly. Fading, dimming, but only in specific hallways. She changed batteries. Same result. "Why does this part feel wrong?" she asked under her breath. Ethan didn't answer. He was focused on a door ahead, labeled Treatment Room C, Dr. Voss Only, in faded marker. He pushed gently, and the rusted hinges gave a slow, aching moan as the door creaked open. The room beyond was largely intact, strange, given how decayed the rest of the hospital was. A single bed sat bolted to the center of the floor, with leather restraints still attached. Shelves lined the walls, most of them filled with thick patient files, vials of amber-colored, liquid and odd metallic instruments whose purpose was unclear. A camera still sat on a tripod in the corner, lens cracked but eerily pointed toward the bed. Mara exhaled sharply. What was going on in here? Ethan knelt beside a drawer that had popped open slightly. Inside were pages and pages of handwritten notes, Voss's notes. They were scrawled with urgency, the handwriting degrading with each entry. Subject: 4 reports hearing whispers again. Seems drawn to the basement level. They call themselves the Beneath. They say they live in the shadows between heartbeats. I saw it last night, behind the mirror. Eyes where no eyes should be. He flipped to the final page. The ink had bled across the paper, but a few words were still legible. The hospital is not haunted. It is hungry. Mara backed away. Ethan, we shouldn't be in here. I know, he said quietly. But he kept reading. That's when they heard the dragging sound. It was distant at first, barely a suggestion, like something heavy being pulled across a tile floor far below them. Then a second noise followed, a soft knock, knock, knock. Rhythmic. Measured. Mara turned off her flashlight. Ethan did the same. They stood in darkness, the only illumination now coming from the camera's night vision screen. The greenish glow cast the room in a ghostly hue. Then they saw it. At the end of the hallway, where the corridor bent left toward the restricted ward, something moved. Not walked, slid. As though it had no legs, only the suggestion of form. A smudged silhouette, crawling along the wall like shadow spilled from a crack in the world. Mara gasped. Are you recording this? Ethan nodded, afraid to speak. The figure stopped, as if it had heard her. Then it turned, not with a head, but with a shift of its entire presence, and began gliding toward them, faster now. Ethan grabbed her hand. Run! Ethan grabbed her hand. Run! They tore down the hallway, breath sharp in their lungs. Their boots pounded the ground as the dragging sound followed. Faster now, louder, echoing through the skeletal remains of the hospital. They passed broken stretchers, shattered medical tools, flickering exit signs that led to bricked-up doors. When they finally stopped, they were in a different wing entirely. Pediatrics. The children's murals on the walls had peeled into grotesque versions of themselves. Smiling, animals with missing eyes, flowers dripping mold instead of petals, toys lay in corners, rusted and gnawed. A mobile hung from the ceiling, still spinning. I don't understand, Mara said, trying to catch her breath. We didn't turn into this wing. I know, Ethan muttered, scanning the area. But the building, it's not laid out the same anymore. That hallway we just ran through, it doesn't connect here. They were being led, herded. Then came the whispering. At first, it was like a breeze brushing through weeds, soft, shapeless, but it grew clearer, more insistent. Dozens of voices overlapping in strange harmony, male, female, child, crying, screaming, chanting. Stay, stay, stay. The flashlight in Ethan's hand snapped off completely. Dead. The night vision camera still worked, but the battery drained with every second. 42%, 37%, 29%. Then the mobile stopped spinning. Mara turned slowly. In the center of the hallway, now stood a woman. She wore an outdated nurse's uniform, her hair in an ashen bun, eyes impossibly wide and glistening black. Her skin was pale and too smooth, almost wax-like. She raised one gloved hand and pointed toward them, no expression on her face. Then her mouth began to open, far wider than humanly possible. Ethan grabbed Mara. We're getting out, Now. They ran again, retracing steps that didn't exist anymore. Every turn brought them deeper, past old surgery rooms, through burn-scarred stairwells, into locker rooms filled with old coats and decaying shoes. Mara sobbed once when she found her own name scrawled across a rusted nameplate above a door. Mara. L. Registered nurse. "I was never here," she whispered. "But someone, or something, thinks you were," Ethan replied. They passed another corridor. This one, again, labeled restricted, morgue below. The air was colder than ever. Frost gathered on the walls. The whispers came louder here, and then Ethan stopped. His breath caught. Down the hallway, hanging on the wall by rusty chains, was a mirror. It was the only surface in the entire hospital not covered in filth, and in it, they saw someone standing behind them. They turned. No one was there. They looked back at the mirror. The figure remained, closer now. Ethan raised the camera slowly, but the lens was cracked and bleeding. From the camera, thick black liquid oozed from the damaged glass. That was when they both heard it. From beneath their feet, from inside the walls, from the corners of the halls. Laughter, childlike, giddy, repeating. Then silence. The camera died. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt intentional. Mara and Ethan stood in the dark, unmoving. The camera, once their only source of light, lay dead in Ethan's hand, dripping with that black fluid. It had no scent, no warmth, just a thick, otherworldly consistency that seemed to absorb the cold around it. "I think we crossed into something," Mara whispered. "Like a threshold," Ethan said. "A part of the hospital that doesn't exist on any blueprint." They were back at the mirror. No sign of the chained frame now. No wall. Just the mirror, freestanding, perfect and clean, as though it had been waiting for them. And within it, their reflections had changed. Mara looked older in the glass, tired, her eyes sunken, skin pale and stretched thin over bone. Ethan looked thinner too, his hair slightly grayer, eyes heavy with dread. But it was what stood behind them that chilled the blood in their veins. 3 figures. One wore a twisted version of a nurse's uniform, stained and stitched like it had been assembled from different eras. Her face was a blur, features shifting, in and out like a corrupted video file. Another appeared to be a man in a doctor's coat, but he had no face. Instead, where his head should be, there was a jagged surgical mask stitched directly onto raw, blackened flesh. And the third, shorter, stood utterly still. A child, head tilted, eyes missing. In the mirror, the child raised a hand, not waving, pointing. Mara turned slowly, and this time, something was there. Not behind them, but behind the mirror. A soft, pulsing red light, distant but steady. As if beckoning, Ethan touched the mirror's surface. It rippled, and then, with an audible pop, it sucked him through. Mara screamed, "Ethan!" No answer, no echo, only the sound of her own breathing and the wet tick-tick of something dripping behind her. She hesitated, then stepped forward, and the mirror swallowed her too. They awoke on the other side. No transition, no falling, just presence. The hallway was different, smoother, cleaner, lit by pale blue ceiling lights that buzzed, faintly. It felt sterile, like they were inside a memory of the hospital rather than the building itself. The walls were covered with framed photos, each one labeled with names and dates. Nurses, orderlies, patients. Some of them smiling, others not. Then Mara saw her own face in one of the frames, and Ethan's. She approached slowly, reading the engraved tag beneath her image. Mara L. Status: retained. Date of return: TBA. Retained, she whispered. I think this place doesn't let people leave once they're recognized, Ethan said beside her. Footsteps approached, slow, unhurried, confident. A man stepped into the hallway from the far end. He wore a crisp white coat, clean as porcelain, and a wide, unsettling smile. His eyes didn't blink. His presence didn't cast a shadow. Welcome back, he said to Mara, voice like silk dipped in static. You've been gone a long time. I've never been here. Oh, but you have, he said gently, tapping her framed photo. You worked with us. You were excellent with the night patients, especially the ones who wouldn't stop screaming. Ethan stepped in front of her. We're not part of this. We're just exploring, documenting. The man's smile faltered slightly. You crossed into a deeper ward. This is the preservation wing. People don't explore here. They return. He gestured down the hallway, where more mirrors were mounted between the photos. Each mirror flickered with a different scene. Fragments of rooms, people crying, red corridors, dripping ceilings, and faces pressed against the glass on the other side, begging to be let through. You've been chosen, the man said. You were always meant to remember. Suddenly, the air trembled. Every mirror cracked slightly, in perfect unison. The photos began to change. Each face on the wall distorted, mouths stretching wide, eyes emptying out. Blood pooled inside the frames. Ethan shouted, "Run!" But the hallway stretched with each step, like a tunnel elongating before them. The doctor's footsteps never sped up, but he remained behind them the entire time, smiling. Midnight is closing, he said softly. And you belong to us now. They burst through a rusted door and collapsed onto concrete. Outside, the hospital towered behind them, broken and black against the night sky. It was over, or so they thought. Ethan's camera was still in his hand, and it was recording again. But the footage showed something impossible. They were still inside the hospital. In the video, the two of them stood motionless in the pediatric wing, unmoving, staring into a mirror. Ethan, Mara said. I know, he whispered. Then who are we? No answer. Only the distant sound of laughter echoing from the trees. The sky had begun to lighten. Just the faintest suggestion of dawn brushing against the treetops. A hush had fallen over the land, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind weaving through the brittle branches. Mara and Ethan sat by the roadside, backs against the guardrail, the abandoned hospital looming behind them like a dream rapidly fading in the morning light. Neither of them spoke. Not at first. The camera sat between them, still, silent. The last clip frozen on the screen, of their unmoving bodies inside the hospital, mocked them with its impossible calm. I don't feel real, Mara finally said. Ethan turned to her. Me neither. They watched the hospital in silence. Nothing stirred, no light, no sound, just the shadowed ruin it had always been. And yet, it felt alive, breathing beneath the silence. We were outside, Ethan said. But something of us stayed inside. A memory? Mara asked. He shook his head. More like an imprint. Like the hospital took what it needed from us and let the rest go. Mara reached into her pocket and pulled out the locket she hadn't remembered wearing when they entered. Inside, a small photo, her as a child in front of a building. The same hospital. A nurse knelt beside her in the picture, the same nurse from the mirror. I think I was here, she said, voice barely above a whisper. When I was little, I was a patient. Ethan leaned in to look. That's why the mirror called you. It knew. They said it feeds on memory, she whispered. Maybe it wasn't just watching us. Maybe it was remembering us. They sat there until the sun finally peeked over the hills, casting pale gold across the hospital's broken windows. The building looked smaller now, almost harmless, just a shell. But Mara knew better. She picked up the camera, slowly erasing the final clip. Ethan didn't stop her. Long after they had left, long after the first light of morning bathed the trees, and the wind died down, the cracked mirror in room 7C shimmered faintly, just once, before going still again, reflecting no one, and yet remembering everything.